Okay. Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order. Notice is hereby given that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, the laws of 1975, notice of this meeting has been sent to all school offices, officially designated newspapers, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted in the Board of Education office 48 hours in advance of this meeting. I'm going to take the roll call. Mrs. Asor?
Here.
Mrs. Austin?
Here.
Mrs. Berkowitz is not. Mrs. Leffler?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
And then flag salute, please. Okay, well, let's introduce our guest. We have Melissa from New Jersey School Boards.
Is it okay if I stand here? Everybody's good with that? Okay. Just before we get started, since it's the first time I'm here, I'm Melissa with New Jersey School Board Association. I am your field service representative. I support all of Bergen County. So if you have any questions with anything that you're doing with your board governance or just need to chat, feel free to pick up the phone and call me. Everybody has my card, and my information's also on the website. So whatever it is, if you're not sure about something, you can come directly to me. You do not need to go through your board president or through your administration. What we talk about will stay with us unless we need to get more information or something along those lines. But I want you to be able to feel comfortable doing that. A little background on me. I am new in this role. I've been in the role just about 6 months, and it's been an amazing 6 months. Learned a lot. But before that, I was like you. I was a board member for 9 years. I sat on the Oltapan Local Board of Education. I was very involved in school boards with their training and stuff like that. But New Jersey School Board rep did not come to our district very much. So I learned a lot in doing the role. And I just want you to know that the whole point of New Jersey School Board Association, it is an association of board members. That's what we are, and that's what we're here for, to support you. Okay? Is there anybody here in their first year? Okay. You're already halfway in, so a lot of this isn't going to apply, but I'm going to go through it. There's a lot of slides here. I will send this to you tomorrow, and you'll be able to access all the links. There's tons of information in here and resources that you'll be able to utilize, and there are plenty of cases that we're not, and opinions that we're not going to go into in detail. I want to highlight a few just to talk about them so you understand the importance of it. But in general, if you can't sleep at night, feel free to go through this. It will help maybe get you to sleep. Some of the stuff's good. I'll probably cover the good ones, though. Anyway, so as we get started, we're covering ethics this evening. And just know that there is legal information in here. I am not an attorney. I do not represent you. I'm not giving you legal advice. If you have any questions, you should always go to your board attorney. Okay, so I'm going to start with the School Ethics Act. And the School Ethics Act was created to, just as it says there, it's essential that the conduct of the members of local boards of education and local administrators hold the respect and confidence of the people, right, of your public. But it goes a step further than that because it is also important, it is the impression of what the public sees you doing, okay? So there's two pieces to that, and the reason we're going to go through some of these cases is you have to learn to look at things a little bit different than just what your intention is, because your intention isn't necessarily what's going to help you. It's understanding what other people looking from the outside might be seeing or what their impression is, unfortunately. So what we're going to go through are going to be considered the minimal ethical standards. And let's go through those. So first of all, who enforces the Ethics Act is the School Ethics Commission, the SEC. And it is 9 individuals, and they're appointed by the governor, and they're broken up to 2 school board members, 5 5 non-school officials, and 2 school administrators. For a long time there, during the previous governor, there were only 6 members on the SEC. So there was a lot of delay in getting opinions out and stuff like that. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But the key is now with the new governor, there are more individuals being appointed. The interesting thing was, as you'll see, is the non-school officials were on the board, but we were missing the school board members and the school administrators. So that also wasn't very helpful. Okay, so provisions of the act, it's about accountability. So you have 4 pieces to it. So you have mandatory training and code of ethics. Those 2 things apply only to board members. And then the other 2 pieces, disclosure statements and prohibited acts, those apply to both board members and administration in your district. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is mandatory training. So mandatory training, if you are new, you would do that in your first 90 days, governance 1. So I'm assuming that you did that. Did you do the weekend or?
No, I did it
Online? Did you do virtual or did you do just at your own pace?
I read the information.
Just on your own pace. Okay. That we offer all different kinds now, and you know, just a heads up, the governance 1 new board member orientation weekend is great. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't cost the district anything. It doesn't cost the board member anything. It's a weekend to get immersed in it. But the so you did your governance 1. In your second year, you need to do governance 2, and you'll see there what each category covers. By the end of your 3rd year, you need to do governance 3. And then for any board members, when you're new term, and just think of it as when you're swearing in, you must do governance 4. And governance 4 is updated every year, so the information is new every year. It's legal information. So you only need to do it the first year of each new term. Again, whenever you're being sworn in. It is really important, though, that you do these trainings and that you do them on time, because the SEC is definitely looking for that and keeping an eye on that. You can, if you go to workshop in October, you can take the next year's training at workshop and get credit for it. Okay, so if you have to do the next year, you can do that. Just check back with me if you're thinking of doing, I don't think governance 4 is offered, so it's really more about 2 and 3. And you won't see governance 1 there either because of the time frame of the 90 days. So financial and personal relative disclosure statements. At this point, if you're a new board member, you must do it within 30 days of being sworn in. But returning school officials, it's April 30th. I'm sure everybody is done at this point. Again, you want to make sure, because there have been many issues with that, and the SEC is definitely cracking down on that. This just goes through an example. So you'll see on here where you see C85-24, that's an ethics complaint. Okay, and you can click on that link when you get this, and you can read through all these, and you'll see all the information there, what it looks like to do an ethics complaint. But as you can see, numerous financial disclosure statement cases occurred in 2025 with varying penalties. Therefore, it's important to complete the disclosure statements accurately and timely. I will tell you this. Before I did this role and had to teach ethics, there were things like you don't think of necessarily that you would put on there. And so when I first came on board with school boards, I had to do this form, do my ethics, and then I went through the training, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute here, right? You start to think about some of these things, because the way they ask those questions, obviously everybody here has done it, so you know there's multiple ways you are asked about your earnings, right? And just as everybody knows, you're not disclosing your income or the money that you're making, but you are disclosing where the money is coming from. And obviously the purpose of that is to make sure there's no conflicts, right? It becomes a public record, it's searchable, anybody can have access to it. So one of the things, my husband works for Dell, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a lot of Dell computers everywhere I'm going, including where I am. I'm like, there's got to be contracts with that, because one of the questions is about the contract. So I went to our legal department. I said, you know, what do I do here? He doesn't sell. He's an architect, an IT architect. He doesn't do any of that. What do I need to do? And she said, oh, yeah, you need to have him go and get the list of contracts and disclose that. And I'm thinking, my husband is going to kill me. Like, I'm going to get divorced over this if I send him back to his company and ask for this. He's going to definitely want, never mind if I were a board member as opposed to an employee, because you would be in the same boat. And so what I ended up doing is I just list My husband works for Dell. I literally just write it out there, and I'm sure there's many schools using Dell products, and it's there. And the point of it is to disclose as much information as you can that you're comfortable with, obviously, right? To me, it's a lot easier than go getting a list of contracts and everything else is, yes, he works for Dell, and that's where we're connected, and that's it. So just something to think about when you're doing these. If you're not sure, err on the side of over-reporting. That's my way of looking at it. Again, knowing it's public, so just be careful what you want to put on there, but think of that from that way. Okay, we're going to go through this. If you don't mind, I'd rather just go around the room for the board members to read the Code of Ethics. Just read the stuff in blue. We're going to go through the Code of Ethics. We're going to do it quickly, I promise. And then just so you know, in the blue is the Code of Ethics. Underneath it are the standards. The standards are what you would need to prove that there was a conflict. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to read that, but I just want you to know what it is when you're going through it and when you have this information. So would you like to start with A, if you don't mind? Okay, so important thing about this one is obviously a lot of board members look at themselves as volunteers, which you are because you get that great big paycheck right at the end of the month, the end of the year. I know the public often thinks that you get a stipend or you get benefits or sometimes a car, and obviously none of those things happen. So, but what you also need to look at yourself as is you are actually a representative of the state. Right? So you're on the local level, but you are an elected official that represents the state. So when you are taking your oath, you need to realize that you are promising to uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulation, mandates by the state, right? Things like that. It's important that you understand when you sit at this table that that is your role, that you must uphold that. Boards do things differently and board members do things differently, but I know even when I sat at the board, I'm like, why are we doing this? If everything's coming from the state, why? What do we do here? What is our purpose if we can't change it or vote no, et cetera, right? What I will tell you is you do have a lot of power in your role. What you need to do is work your way back up. You need to work to your state representatives, your assembly people, and things like that in your current role if you choose to do that. But what you really don't want to do is vote no here at the table for things that are mandated or that you are legally, put out by the state that you're supposed to uphold. And the only reason I say that is because that complicates things and makes it more difficult for your students, right? Because then you turn into lawsuits and you turn around and around on different things. Again, everybody has to take their role the way they want to, but I just want you to realize that this isn't the only way to do it. There is an opportunity as a board member that you can speak to your local representatives. You can get involved in school board association and you can get the county level. If you haven't gone to them, there's county meetings and your voice can be heard through those options. So I just want you to know you have more than one option, and that was the important piece of that part of the Code of Ethics. B. So this one's pretty clear. You represent all children. Okay? See? Right. So, your role is not to run the district, right, but to oversee it. And these are the ways that you do it through policy, through planning, through appraisal. We're in the process now, right, of the superintendent evaluation. Make sure that you get involved in that you do your part. And the other piece here that's interesting, that's not yellow, but you make these moves only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. That is why when you do policy readings, you have 2 readings, right? It gives your public the opportunity, those that will be affected by it, to come in and speak and give you commentary. D. Right. So again, it's not to run the district, right? It's to oversee it. And by the way, if you have any questions while we're going through this, jump in. Don't hesitate. Okay. E, we're going to go right back around, sorry.
I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and make no personal promises and or take any private action that may compromise the board.
Okay, so one thing that I see a lot with new board members, and some that have been here a while, you will hear them say, I represent the people that put me here. I represent the people that voted for me. And actually, that is not true. You represent everybody in the district, and most importantly, all the students in the district. You don't have your own group of people. When you get on the board, things change drastically from when you were running as a candidate. And, you know, it's a little difficult to make that move, and it's something that most candidates don't think about before they get on the board, because now you have to work possibly alongside somebody that you were running against, and that all has to change, because the only way this works is if the board works together, because obviously the board functions with one voice, right? The majority voice is, the board is one voice. Okay? F? Right, so that's again, a similar, you represent all of the students in the district. G?
Hold confidential all matters individuals or the students. All other matters shall provide accurate information in concert with the other board members, superintendent and staff, the aspirations of the community.
Right. So obviously everything in executive session is confidential. It remains in executive session. The key here is I will provide accurate information. And that's really important, because when you leave the board table, you're speaking, if you're speaking as a board member, you should be speaking about what the board agreed upon, right? That is the one voice. You know, you don't have to hide. Excuse me, it's great to be transparent. If you voted no for something, it's on the record, it's okay. But once the vote has passed, everybody has to get on board. That's how boards work. So that's the key here, and making sure that you're providing accurate information and not your personal perspective based on what you thought when you didn't agree with an opinion or something along those lines. Okay. H, we're almost done with these. Okay, so the only person that the board evaluates and hires and terminates or doesn't renew is the superintendent. Everybody else is at the recommendation of the superintendent. So that's really important to understand as well. I. Back around. Okay, that's really important, especially on social media. We're seeing a lot of, and I'm sure everybody is, individuals ganging up now on librarians. That's a big thing in the schools. So it's important as a board member that you're very careful in what you say and what you do out there, especially in social media. And it is important. It is your role to support your staff. Okay? Last one. Okay, so this speaks to chain of command, which is super important. You'll find, and you'll see this especially, I was on a local district, so I get it. When you have children in the district and you're doing things with the families, whether it be with sports or other organizations, you'll find yourself a lot of times with other parents, and the kids are all hanging out. You're having, you know, pizza, a couple of beers, and all of a sudden somebody starts talking about something that played out in school, right? Do yourself a favor and remove yourself from that conversation, because even though you're hanging out with individuals with the mindset of we're just a bunch of parents, you are always perceived as a board member. And this is the part that gets a little complicated, right? Because you certainly have the right to hang out. I don't mean that. And if you're like kind of stepping back and not being involved, that's fine. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to get too into the details. You definitely don't want to get into the debate and the conversation, because anything that you state, most people are going to look at you as if you know more. And chances are you don't know anything about what happened, whatever that incident is. You know, and we know that. As board members, you would know that. But the rest of the public thinks you know everything that happens in the district, and you're privy to all that confidential information. So they're going to read into anything that you say. So just be aware of that. I felt that way. It was like, oh no, people understand the difference. They don't. I can promise you that. So just be very careful with that. And it's really important because your role as a board member, things can escalate their way up to the board table. And if you've been involved in it, you will have to recuse yourself and remove yourself from doing the job that you're here to do, which doesn't make much sense if you get too into the weeds of the details or any of that kind of stuff. That being said, anything you hear, I highly recommend you pick up the phone and you call your superintendent or send a text or carefully worded email just to let your superintendent know what's going on. It goes to that no surprises situation. And chances are she's very well aware of it, but just so that she knows what's happening out in the community. Okay, ethics complaints. I'm hoping you never have to do one, and I'm hoping you never have to get one. So this will just quickly, it goes over, any person may file a complaint with the SEC alleging a violation of School Ethics Act. It doesn't have to be somebody in the district. It could be somebody outside the state. It could be a lot of things, okay? So the reason you want to be careful is it can also be somebody who wants your seat, right? It could be somebody who's looking to create an issue in the community. And it doesn't appear that you have those issues here, but it can happen at any time. So it's just something to be aware of your behavior and what you're doing looking through another lens. And then this goes into, you have to do it in a 180-day window and stuff like that. Okay, so what are the penalties or the sanctions? The SEC recommends the penalties and sanctions to the commissioner. And these are your options. It's a reprimand, which is basically just a slap on the wrist. A censure is a formal disapproval by the commissioner, and that is something that actually gets adopted by your board in public session. So it's made very public. Suspension is you're barred from engaging in any activity matter for a designated period of time, and then finally it could go as far, if it's egregious enough, to be a removal. If you're not sure, if you are doing something and you're not, or planning on doing something, make sure, if you seek advice of your board attorney, that you're giving your board attorney all the details. All details. Even if you think they're not important, it could make a difference in what's recommended of you, right? So if you're getting advice of counsel, the key here is that you follow that advice. Don't ask for counsel and then choose to do something different and expect to be defended or in a good place should it come down the pike to have an ethics complaint. So that's the key. If you ask for the advice, you should take the advice. That's the only way that your board attorney will be able to defend you. Let's see. So here's an example. A board member told the public, no, I don't want to do that one. Hold on. A board member sent an email about attending a CPAG meeting as a member of CPAG using her board member email. In doing so, it creates a justifiable impression that objectivity or independence has been impaired. And again, you can go to this and you can read all the details on this. Does everybody know what CPAG is? Okay. It's, I'm going to probably say it wrong, Special Education Parent Advisory, okay, group. So it is a group that that's usually involved with the schools, right? Usually each school has one. And it's kind of parent-run, but the school steps in and helps a lot. And, it's supposed, like, the goal of it is to have it parent-run, meaning what they're looking for support. And the school kind of brings in speakers or different options to help them. And it's supposed to be like a support group kind of situation and an educational group. So you have a board member who was involved on both ends, right? They were on a committee that was involved with special education and those kind of things, as well as heavily involved on a personal level in the CPAG group. And sometimes it's very important when a board president is assigning the committees that they take these things into consideration. And it can go either way, right? Logically, you would think this person knows a lot about this, they're passionate about it, they'd be a great fit for the committee. Unfortunately, sometimes that's not a smart move because it gets difficult for them to separate, right, their passion and their interest from the two things. So when you're acting as a parent and an advocate, it's one thing. When you're acting as a board member, you can easily get that thing muddied up. And that's what happened here. Now, the reason that the conflict was found and supported was because it was the board member sent out an email to the group accidentally from her board email. But without without knowing this individual, my bet would be there was probably a lot more involved in this that got to this point, that somebody had to find a way to create calling this out. So again, you want to be really careful if you're passionate about something. Maybe the committee for that is not the right thing. I'll give another example, finance committee. If you happen to be a CPA or an investment, a finance person, a lot of people would think it's the perfect fit to be on the finance committee. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, depending on the individual. But the key thing is, you also have to know, as a board member, am I going to know too much? Am I going to go down into the weeds, into going into running the district and getting involved too deeply because I know too much personally? So you want to be careful that you don't, I guess, get too deeply into something that you're overly passionate about. Yes. Great.
Our council only has permission to speak to myself, the board secretary. So yeah, you have to reach out to one of those first, and you can give that attorney permission and say you have a specific question, but we doesn't absolutely.
And another option that you have is through New Jersey School Board Association. We have attorney of the day. So we have an attorney, we have two attorneys, and actually one worked for the SEC. So my point is, they're not going to also give you legal advice. You're going to want to go to your board attorney for that, but you may want to jump off and start out there and reach out to them. And you can always reach out to me, and I can give you those contact informations. But yeah, it's especially important if you're worried about having a conflict, or if you're not sure, because as we go through this, especially with family members, with negotiations and all that kind of stuff, you definitely want clarification if you're not sure. Err on the side of being cautious. This one's a really egregious one, so I'm going to give you this example. A 15-plus year board member took inappropriate action that was beyond the role of the board member. The action of the board member usurped the authority of the superintendent, who was responsible for making disciplinary recommendations. The board member took it upon themselves to go to the employee's home, pick up a letter, present it on behalf of the employee, directed the BA to not give a copy of the letter to the superintendent, and then instead of recusing herself from the matter in which she had a personal interest and personal involvement, the board member advocated on behalf of the employee and questioned the superintendent recommendation of an employee. Okay, so what that played out to be, the board member was friends with the staff member, and the staff member was going to be, there was going to be a discussion during executive session, and the staff member did not want to come and didn't want to make it public. So what the staff member did was write up their side of the situation as a defense, gave it to the board member, who actually went to the house and picked it up, brought it in to the district, had the BA make a copy of it, handed it out to all other board members, not giving any heads up at all to the superintendent. Superintendent knew none of this. Then the executive session starts on this item, and he or she, I don't know, has no idea that this letter is out there, and then that board member continues not to recuse themselves, but to sit there and defend that individual, right? So that is so crossing the line. Everybody gets that, right? That is definitely an example of egregious behavior. So that ended up in a suspension of 60 days. So real quick, we'll go over recusal versus abstention. Recusal means that you're going to remove yourself from the vote or the discussion because you legally cannot be involved, or because you may have a conflict, or you may have an interest or something along those lines. Okay? In that case, you would recuse yourself. If you just are choosing not to vote on something, you would abstain. Those are the differences. What I will tell you is if you abstain from something and you should have recused, it's not a big deal. The big thing here is that you make sure that you do not vote on something that you may be conflicted on. Okay? I get questions, what if my child is in the band and we're voting on band uniforms? Should I recuse myself or abstain? And the answer is, if your child is getting a uniform just like every other child in the band, you can vote. That is fine. your child is not getting anything different. If your child's the only one getting a new uniform, that would be a different situation, and hopefully that's not happening. But so just take those things into consideration. Also, what I will caution you about, if your child is has an IEP or any kind of things along those lines, and they may be in either the billing or, you know, that you're approving or within an agenda item, you have to be careful because it's difficult to identify them because they are identified right with the code. So just make sure that you have conversations with your administration and that you're given a heads up if you need to recuse yourself from something along those lines. Okay? So relationship definitions, you'll see right here there's a link. And this goes through all the different ways that a relative can create a conflict. I'm not going to go into it because, again, it's so convoluted, it's crazy. It's a very long list. If you're not sure, request your board attorney to give you a recommendation on whether or not you would be conflicted in certain situations. Okay? Again, that's another one of those things on the disclosure forms that you fill out, right? Is you have any family members in the district. That's why. Not just in the district, sorry, that even may work for the association. There's a ton of questions on that when you do your disclosure statement. I think I listed everybody I know. That was even related to half of them. And again, it's just easier to err on the side of putting it down. So advisory opinions are different than ethics complaints. Advisory opinions are the opportunity for a board member to get the SEC to weigh in whether something they're going to do is a conflict or a problem. Okay? And you have that opportunity to do that. There's a couple of restrictions. First of all, it has to be a future conduct. It can't be something you did already and say, well, should I have done this? That's not the same thing. They will not give you an opinion on that. And the other thing is you should, they require that you check and see if anybody else has asked the same question. And I'll show you some examples and you'll see how easy it is to find that out. And it is usually has to be related to you or a board member within your district. You can't ask random questions about hypothetical situations about people that aren't within this. And the reason for that's obviously to keep it under control. The goal is to avoid you from doing something you shouldn't do, not to try to catch somebody else that was doing something they shouldn't have done, but you don't want to go through the ethics complaint process. The other thing is you need 6 votes from the SEC to make the opinion public. So what was happening, that was why I mentioned earlier, only having 6 board members, SEC members, was a problem to get these opinions out because all of them had to be there in order to do that. So that's why it's good that they're starting to fill that board up a little bit more. So the same thing goes. If you get an advisory opinion, you go through the process of asking for an advisory opinion and you get one, you have to listen to it. You don't get to say, well, I didn't like that answer, so I'm going to go ahead and take my chances. These are examples of advisory opinions, and you could see they're very straightforward. You can click on all of these, and you'll be able to see the examples. And if you Google it, is on the Department of Education. That's where all of these are. And the ones that you're seeing here are from 2025, but they go back further, et cetera. When you read these, be careful that you're reading all the details, because your details might be slightly different, and if your details are slightly different, it may be a different opinion. So make sure that everything aligns, anything that's pertinent is aligning with what you're reading in the questions. And they're really easy to basically Google and find. They're very straightforward. Can a board member advocate for their child? Does a board member who supported the local union have a conflict related to negotiations? Very easy to find the answers to that. So the ethics regulation definition of a benefit is a direct or indirect advantage, profit, privilege, or gain, whether personal, financial, or otherwise. And again, remember, this is the perception of the public, not what your intent was. And it's really important to understand it doesn't have to be a monetary benefit. It could just be the impression that there's a quid pro quo or something along those lines. This one's a good one. A board member spoke during the board meeting about how he was running for General Assembly. He was using his position on the board to solicit support and or votes for his personal political campaign. He used the schools to acquire a personal benefit. And the recommendation was a reprimand. So basically, during new business, he said, hey, by the way, you're all here, because he had a full house. Just so you know, you guys love what the job I do here. I'm now running for General Assembly, so please get out there and vote for me for that. I mean, obviously, it's not appropriate to use your board seat to do. This is a list of prohibited acts. And if you're in these situations, you would recuse yourself if there is a benefit to you as a school official or your immediate family due to business interest or professional activity in conflict. So if you have an interest in a business that's coming before the board, can't think of one right now, but for example, you own a restaurant or you own a pizzeria, and the board is trying to decide if they're going to go through the process of approving certain vendors to provide food to the school. You would need to recuse yourself from there. What that means is you're recusing yourself for the conflict, and you're not involved in the discussion, not just the vote. Don't be involved in the discussion. Don't be in the room for the discussion. Gifts, favors, all those kind of things. So you can go through this list. It's not a conflict if you're not accruing a greater gain than any others. That goes to the example that I gave you with the band uniforms. Okay, again, you can read through all these cases. I'm going to give you this one because it's a good example. A board member was promoting his nonprofit to the parents in his community as well to staff and teachers. The determinative factor is the public's perception. Oh, I'm sorry, but yeah. So the example here, and this is a fairly local district that this happened at, I believe it was the board president, was involved in a nonprofit organization that did tutoring for students, that were struggling and had economic issues, et cetera. It was a free tutoring volunteer program. The board president brought it to the superintendent. The superintendent thought it was a great idea. They came together. This organization comes into the district, starts offering free tutoring to the students. Turns out a complaint is lodged against that individual, and the reason for it was he used his position as a board member to get the other organization involved in the district. Now, this is the perfect example, right? As a board member, by the way, there was no financial gain here. He was a volunteer in both organizations. There was no benefit from that perspective. The benefit was that he used his role to help connect and bring that organization into the district. If you read it, it's a very long decision. It goes back and forth. You can tell that they had a hard time trying to find this individual guilty of a conflict because the purpose by that individual was truly on the up and up. But if you switch out the details a little bit, obviously it becomes a problem because it's almost deal making, right? The reality is, I'm assuming, had the board president simply stepped out of it and said, hey, to the superintendent, I know this great organization. In case you want to reach out, I need to step away from it, but this organization exists. Maybe that would have helped. That case is so important just so that you understand, again, it's the perception of the public, not just your intention. Okay, I'm going to skip through these cases. Hiring personnel. If a relative already works in the district, when you become a board member, that relative is fine, right? You may be, or you will be, in conflict when it comes to anybody that is above the level of that family member, right? So if it's a teacher, then the principal, superintendent, et cetera, you would need to recuse yourself from any discussion or involvement involving those individuals, including the CSA evaluation, hiring a superintendent, renewing the contract, et cetera. You would need to recuse yourself from that. And once you are on the board, you cannot have family hired into the district or relatives. One little note on that one too, because sometimes this also gets confusing because you think, okay, obviously if they're a teacher, that's pretty clear. There was a district that was a new board member, got onto the board. They were just about to start a superintendent search, and that new board member wasn't able to partake in it because their spouse was a coach for one of the sports. I think it was even an assistant coach. And they've received a small stipend through the district, and therefore they had a relative that was employed by the district. The board argued it, went in to get an opinion, because in their mind, it's such a minimal stipend. Why would this have an impact? Unfortunately, I would say it's most likely because you kind of draw a line somewhere. And you can't say, well, if you make this much money, you would have an impact, or that much money, et cetera. It's just a straight rule. So that's one that's really removed that you might not think of. That's why I bring it up as an example. We talked about committee assignments. I mentioned that before. Just be careful that you don't put yourself in a position, or if you are assigning committee members, that you don't get somebody that's going to get into the weeds in that role. This goes over collective bargaining, and it's a chart, but again, we'll go through it real quick. Relationship to a board member: if an immediate family member or relative works in the district, yes, they do. Current member of a statewide public teachers union? No, they're not. Can you participate in negotiations? No, you cannot. And can you vote to ratify the contract? No, you cannot. The reason for that is even non-union roles within a district tend to have their increases based on the decision from the union contract. That's why. But the key here is, if you're not sure, get that recommendation from your board attorney as to whether or not you're conflicted. Campaigns and collective bargaining. So board members who receive union endorsements may be conflicted from collective bargaining if negotiations begin with the year of the election. This is one of those that's a very gray area. Endorsement of a candidate by a local and or national statewide union doesn't create a per se future conflict unless a financial contribution is given with the intent to influence. So if the question is, you ran for the board, you were endorsed by the Teachers Association, the question is, can you be on the negotiations committee? The answer is maybe, right? All the circumstances have to be looked at. Did you get a financial donation to do mailings, et cetera? How much did they endorse them? Did they just say, yeah, we endorsed them one time and never heard anything else about it? Did they send out a mailing campaign? All these things come into play. So it's not a black and white. And I do think one of the reasons for this is it is also a political move. Sometimes there has been examples of associations endorsing candidates who they really don't want to be on the board, but they know they're going to win, and they do that to keep them off the negotiations committees if they endorse them. And that board member may not even accept the endorsement or want the endorsement, but that's why it's a gray area, and it's not just black and white, because it could be outside factors in there. Volunteering in the school. The key here is, if you're volunteering in the school, you need to be really careful in what your role is. So there's 3 things that I'm going to recommend that you avoid. Don't handle money in a volunteer role. Do not oversee any staff members, and do not oversee any students in your role. Any questions on that? Because that usually, no? Okay. So I had somebody ask me, obviously, board members tend to also be super volunteers. That's how you get into this. And especially on a elementary level, the school's always needing volunteers. So if you are going to be volunteering, just be careful when you come into the district that you're not having conversations with the staff and saying, oh, what'd you think about that math curriculum we just passed? Those are the kind of things that you want to avoid. Because what I can promise you is, when you come into the district, all teachers know that you're a board member. And usually after you step into the school, within 5 minutes, the entire school knows that you're there. And even if you are somebody who gets along very well with the staff, there's still going to be some that will have a level of discomfort and fear that you may be in there evaluating them. So you want to always keep that in the back of your mind to make sure that you're not making the staff uncomfortable. Okay. Also, if you're coming in the district to volunteer, coming in to read a book, you're coming in to help with the Christmas shop that they do, or any of those things, just make sure that your superintendent is aware that you'll be coming in the district. It helps her know who's coming and going, and then if she gets a call, she understands, and she's able to manage it. As we mentioned, we're going to stay on point with the purpose of the visit. I will also tell you, I've had questions about advocating for your child. So as a board member, above all else, your child comes first. So if you need to advocate for your child in any way, you put the board hat aside and you make sure that the individuals that you will be speaking to are fully aware that you are there as a parent and as a parent only. But do not hesitate to advocate for your child because you're worried about creating a problem with your board role, because that should be first and foremost. Just do it carefully. Social media, when a board member, okay. Social media, if you're going to use it, just be careful, okay? We're going to get into the next slide, gives you a waiver to use. You're entitled to your opinion in social media. And if you use the waiver and you make clear that your opinion is not based on your role as a board member, just be careful if it's a topic that you've been discussing in the board. The waiver does not, it's not a get out of jail free card. You can't put the waiver in and then just go completely off the rails with something that's happening in your district, et cetera, because it doesn't work that way. You can't use the waiver in that way. And the other thing I'm going to recommend is if you're involved in the Facebook mom groups, which every town has it, and you're seeing conversation go on, don't get involved in it. You will never win a debate on social media. It is not worth putting yourself out there. And when you see, hey, do you think we're not going to have school tomorrow because it's going to snow, and you know that they're going to have school, don't do it. They'll find out soon enough. Somebody will jump on there and give the right answer. Somebody will jump on there and give the wrong answer too. But let that play out. Don't step in there and take that role. If you see something brewing in your town, just keep in mind that just because the loudest voices aren't necessarily the pulse of your community, but also make sure you let your superintendent know what's going on if something's brewing, so once again she can be prepared. This is the waiver. Again, it'll be in the presentation that I sent to you that you can put on your post if you are posting something. These are examples. I won't go through those. And these are just a few other tidbits. When you are at the board table and if you have your phone out, just be aware. You shouldn't be scrolling on your phone. I have watched that multiple boards. Don't scroll on your tablet, on your phone, etc. when you're in a meeting, because somebody here might be scrolling through designs and somebody over there might be doing something else, sending a text. And to the public, it would appear that you may be having a side conversation. Those are the things you want to avoid, because then you'll end up with somebody opering your text, and that goes down a road that you just don't want to go down. And it's also just not a good look. If you need your phone, and I'll be the first one to tell you, my kids, I had one that wasn't even in kindergarten when I was on the board, and so they're home with babysitters. And I had my phone out. If I was getting a call, I was going to take that call. Take the phone or a text. Take the phone, excuse yourself. It should be important enough to do that. Leave the room, deal with it, and come back. This way you do not give the perception to the public that something else is happening, okay? And I'll tell you, even now, if I had it, my daughter's in college, and I would still be worried about that call if it was emergency. And that's it. These are more resources that you can go through. And again, I will send this to you with the links. So, any questions? Nothing? All right, thank you. And I want to also just say thank you very much for everything you do, because I know you probably don't hear that very often as board members. I know how hard it is. I know how much time it takes, and we greatly appreciate the work you do.
All right, good evening, everyone. Our supervisor of curriculum, Kim Dowling, is here with us tonight, and she is going to kick us off with our board goals. We have the academic goals, social and emotional wellness goals, operational goals, technology goals. And just to kind of remind all of you, I've said this before, this time of year is actually a process that I really enjoy. I meet with all of our departments. I meet with principals, the administrators, a lot with Ms. Dowling. And what we do is we really talk about what's been helping, what's been working, what's not working for our current goals. What do we want to do more of? Kim and I look at data a lot to see what do we want to keep on there from year to year, what might be change. And so it's just it's good conversation that we have together as a district. And we really just keep thinking about how we're going to move forward and continue to make the progress that we want to make. So I really do enjoy these conversations and these meetings. Tonight you're going to see too, Miss Dowling always does wonderful presentations. So tonight you're going to see one of the things that she's adding to the academic goals is really she's going to take a kind of get back on a memory walk here about some things and places that we've started, because one thing I want everyone to realize about the goals is they are not, they should not be shiny objects where they're sound like these wonderful goals that are really just fluff. Sometimes our goals seem very similar to the year before, and it might be a minor tweak, but it's a very impactful tweak. And so that's what we want you to kind of focus on tonight and take away from this evening. It's not to make a lot of shiny bells and whistles for you guys. It's real work that gets done. So with that, I will leave it to Kim to kick us off. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. I can't believe that it is May and we're here talking about next school year, but I am excited, and we are going to start with student learning and achievement. As Mrs. Signori was just saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about our first goal with data and take us down memory lane to show you where we started and where we are today and where we're moving forward for next year. So our first goal is really going to talk about cultivating a collaborative and reflective learning community that leverages our assessments. This is something that we have been talking about throughout the last few years with NJSLA or PARC, and then it was NJSLA. Next year it'll be NJSLA-A, and really synthesizing that data with our linked data, with IXL information, with formative assessments in the classroom, and building those structures to give time to teachers during faculty meetings and during times with me and our consultants to really tear apart that data and do what's best for kids and have those DDI periods where you can be intentional and have targeted instruction and data-driven learning in all of our classrooms. So what does that look like a few years back? When we started with basic assessments. We were looking at formative assessments. We were looking at tests and quizzes in our classrooms, and we were taking apart what our kids understood and what they were having trouble with, and that's what we were using to differentiate instruction in the classroom, which was a great start. But then we had these lovely evidence reports that were given to us with NJSLA, where we were able to see the standards that our students were doing really well with and the standards that we were kind of on par with the state or below the state, which is what we looked at. And then after looking at those standards, that's where we would have our goals written for the following school year. And we would say, this is where we should focus on. Because we're always happy to celebrate areas that we do well, but there's always areas that we can do better with. And this was our starting point using these evidence reports. And then after a couple of years of looking at them, we started to identify trends. What that means is we were looking at standards that we had trouble with over 2 years, over 3 years, meaning that our kids were either on par with the state or below the state. Then we would look at curriculum and say, okay, where do we teach this? How do we teach this? How much time do we spend on this? What materials do we use? And we have really good discussions with the people who are in the classrooms and saying, oh, well, I need more of this, or I need less of this, or we need more time here. And this is where we take our curriculum from and we say, we need to move this up. We need to have more time on this unit, less time on this unit. We need to purchase this. And that's when we start for the following year. So after we identify trends, income Linkit, who, as you all know, is I love Linkit. Linkit, I love tearing apart the data. It gives us really, really good information. We have benchmarks 3 times a year, but besides the benchmarks, we also are able to progress monitor. So after we identify these trends, then we also look at Linkit, because I think you've heard me say in the past, NJSLA is one assessment. It gives us a lot of information, but it's still only one assessment. And if you really want to get a good picture of a child, you don't just use one assessment. You can't. So then we were looking at Linkit data in conjunction with our data from NJSLA and saying, okay, this standard we missed on NJSLA, how are our students doing on Linkit? Is it the same? Is it not the same? And if it was the same, that was an area that we were focusing on for the following school year, and we were starting there. That was our starting point for the following school year with Linkit. Another great thing that Linkit does here too is you can see this is an example of how the students did, the school did, and the district did. It also, if you clicked on the red on the bottom, it would give you a list of students as well, so that the teachers could easily differentiate in the classroom. And with all of this, we had some really good success. If you'll notice, this is a slide from our district assessment report, my favorite night and yours, for the year. This is a slide that we presented out in October. We're very proud of how our students are exceeding and progressing. 35% of our students were exceeding in grade 4 ELA, 49% in grade 6 ELA, an increase of 37% in math at Holdrum since 2021. These are huge numbers that don't just happen overnight, but it happens from looking at data and tearing it apart and looking at what is black and what is white. Data really has very few gray areas, and that's how we can show progress and grow with our students. But just like this, we have areas to celebrate. We tear apart the data. There's areas that we need to focus on for next year. And after looking at this, we said one of the areas that we were going to look at was grade 3 ELA. So this year, this is how we moved forward from looking at, from synthesizing NJSLA and Linkit, and how are we going to use it. So each teacher received on the top, it would say their name and their grade level, and all of the standards for ELA for their grade level. And what we did is we met and we looked at Form A to Form B. And we looked at the standards that our students decreased on in Linkit from Form A to Form B. And again, this work is happening from B to C, but this is just an example for that you can see. And those skills. And then we said, okay, where were our students last year or the year before? What areas were we consistently struggling with? And that was highlighted in yellow. And from here, we looked at the questions. What types of questions is it being asked? What types of questions do we have in our curriculum? What types of resources do we have in our curriculum for all of these standards? What are you doing in the classroom? How long are you spending on this in the classroom? And having good conversations to help our students. So this is where we landed this year with this goal. And then next year, we're going to level up. And this is what it's going to look like as an example for next year. I'm just going to stand over here. So next year, this is exactly what our teachers saw this year when I was just showing you this and then this. Everybody got one of these. We had good conversations. We talked about it. And then we built instructional strategies. But next year, we're going to talk about goals based upon Linkit from the year before, based upon how teachers did with NJSLA. This might look a little bit different, to be very honest with you, next year, because I don't know when we're going to get the scores. They're telling late fall, maybe even early winter for next year. So our district assessment report might have to hold off till a little later. I know you're all devastated, but it will happen, I promise. But this is what we're looking for next year when it comes to data. Building goals and instructional action plans with each one of our teachers based upon their individual data for their students. We're going to identify priority areas, which you saw up, the standards that this individual teacher, an example of a teacher, might have had trouble with, some actions, some tiered supports, and then those students that are in those tiers really looking to say where was the benchmark score after you retaught it, what was the progress monitoring score? And then we also incorporated DIBBLES this year as our early literacy screener. This is for grade 3, so we those students do take DIBBLES as well. They take it in K through 3. So they would have a benchmark score and also a DIBBLES progress monitoring score, because that's something that we're incorporating next year as well, as progress monitoring for DIBBLES. This year we just did the benchmarks 3 times a year for that. So the teachers are going to easily be able to see what has worked, what's not working, and then if we have to go back to the drawing board. So this would be for priority area 1. Priority area 2 is vocabulary development and the standards for that, and so on. So we're going to be building structures with the teachers for this after each assessment, so they have nice data right here. It's easy to see. You can see growth. And you'll see at the bottom that we're going to include coaching cycle structures based upon this data. So our coaches that we're going to have next year, Meredith Alvaro and Shelley Klein, are going to be working with our staff members based upon those standards and based upon those skills. So data analysis and planning will take place in September and October, where we're going to look at Linkit, look at NJSLAA if we have it, probably not, and DIBBLES. Then the plan is to co-plan for November and December, get in those classrooms for January to March, and then really reflect and refine what we're going to be doing for the next school year. But I can't think that far ahead right now, for the next school year in April and June. So this is the plan of what that goal is going to actually look like in real time in our classrooms with our teachers. Just so you have a little bit of a better idea of that. Okay. Okay. Goal 2 is teaching and learning. We are going to continue to implement a cohesive and engaging curriculum that, of course, will align to NJSLS. We do have some content areas that are up for a revision cycle for next year. So we'll be writing computer science and design thinking, science, visual and performing arts, and world language across all grade levels. So we will be busy in my office again next year. Just as always, we'll be providing targeted professional development to our staff. Okay. Okay.
All right, I'll take health and wellness, but before I do, I did just want to say thanks again to Mrs. Dowling. where she talked about the leveling up on that first academic goal, it's really a huge shift. We talk a lot about individualizing for the students, and now she really took this structure and is individualizing for the teachers as well. So now not only are we really personalized instruction for kids, we're personalized coaching. And you've heard us talk about moving from a PD model to a coaching model the last couple of years. And so this year in particular was a coaching model, but now next year it's like individualized coaching models based on their kids' individualized instruction. So it sounds like a lot, but it's really an incredible thing that Kim should probably package, and it's really great. So I'm very excited to see how this how this gets implemented next year. I think it's a really, really great next step that she created for the support for our teachers and our kids. So
Definitely. I was going to say we were going to do a lot more coaching this year. We ended up doing a little bit more PD because the state threw a wrench at us
with
at the beginning of
NJS,
this year and
right.
said, "Hey, we're changing your test."
Right.
So
we have to
you know,
we have to also flow with
We do.
any of the punches
We
the
do.
state gives us. So
yes.
So health and wellness, every year we focus on this goal. Some of these are enhancements and some of these, so you'll kind of see that. One of the first goals, I mean, really it's always obviously to prioritize a culture of care and connection across the district and have supporting learning environments. And one of the things that we've done was the child study team, they worked with a group of students a couple years ago to implement something called Unstuck and On Target. And that program was really aimed at the elementary school to help some students with sort of like executive functioning type skills, organization, things like that. And then last year, it was going so well that we wanted to kind of expand this outside of the child study team. And so the child study team members worked in collaboration with the guidance counselors, and then that went really well. So next year, the guidance counselors are going to be doing cycles of this in fifth grade, mostly in fifth grade, because that's the grade that we realize needs that support before they transition to the middle school. So we're hoping that that goal next year is going to really target that population of students and help them so that they can hit the ground running at Holdrum. So we're excited for that goal to take off. The next one was vision boards. So we do vision boards with sets of students at Holdrum, and we were doing it with all grades. And then we really found that it was most impactful for the sixth graders. So kind of the same thing. They get there, they're new. What is their vision? What do they want to set for themselves? So we're going to kind of enhance those vision boards, saturate the sixth grade class with it, and then we are going to do it with the other grade levels, but more on a choice that those students choose to do so. So that's how we're kind of reshaping the vision boards that we've been implementing the last couple of years. And the third one is great. You all know we do have a partnership with West Bergen Mental Health, and we have a full-time clinician, Sam, who is on staff from West Bergen, but we feel like he's part of our staff. He's here with us every day. He has been doing a lot for the social and emotional goal, but one of the things that we're going to start utilizing him more, every year we try to utilize his expertise to sort of help with this goal. And there was a recent law that was passed that all schools have to have a threat assessment committee. And that is to help identify students that may be in crisis and may act on that crisis, and you want to be proactive and be able to kind of see that and get those students the help they need. So I talked to Sam during this process, and he is going to be a member of our threat assessment teams. He's also going to be more involved with our INRS, because sometimes the INRS process can be academic, it can be behavioral, and often social and emotional wellness goes along with both of those things. So to have an expert like that sit on those cases to help guide us on the best supports that we can give that student, that'll be another area. So he's been a wonderful addition to our schools, and I just think it's going to be even more beneficial as he continues to expand his role with us. So that's our main health and wellness that we're going to focus on as far as our board goals for next year. Thank you, Kim. And then we have operations. I can't read that from here, Kelly, or do you want to read it? Thank you.
Okay. Let me stand over here. No, I think there's only one slide. Operational goals. So, very excited. This is to maintain a safe and healthy environment and develop and implement an annual budget to continue to support educational and operational initiatives while providing fiscal accountability to the community. Oh, hold it closer. Can you hear me now? Okay, so I'm not going to repeat that. You can all read it. This is my personal goal each year, is to bring the Finance Committee a draft budget by the first Finance Committee, which will be January 4th of 2027. This gives everybody a chance to look at the budget, see where we are, and make some decisions that are responsible for the community. In that vein, for the 26-27 school year, we had made the decision to purchase a district van, which will help to offset the transporting of some of our in-district special ed students right now. We're going to start small. The law came into effect in July of 2025 that you can purchase a driver and 8-passenger van. You do not have to have a CDL license to operate that, as long as you're a district employee. And then there's a list of criteria in terms of your driver's license has to be run every so often. And so we're going to use that van to help to offset some of the costs of transportation. As you are aware, Region 2 has been disbanded. So on this particular agenda, you will see later on this evening that we have written RFPs for related services that our Region 2 had been arranging and organizing for us. We have now done that, so we are awarding to related services, therapists, and consultants. We're going to continue sharing services. Anyone who's willing to share, we share with. We look, we seek, we find, and we want to make sure that we get the best prices for our district. And also services. Reason being I say that is we have an agreement with the township that if one of our vehicles has broken down and their mechanics are available, we work with them. We also work with Old Tapan. Just an example of where we share those types of services. And then onboarding. This is a goal that has been actually a couple years in the making. Our platform is switching from our finance from one to the other, and we're finally in the process where payroll we are fully implementing in the new platform. Accounts payable we're fully implemented in the new platform. We're all going to be totally on the new platform once July 1st comes. So we're at that final stage, and thanks to Mr. O'Gara for his help and assistance with my department. We appreciate that. And now for technology. Do you want to come up and do it? Come on. Take credit. And here's
Well, thank you very much. So yes, technology goals for next year. We have our first goal is 2 grade levels of new student devices. So every year we do a refresh cycle. 2 grade levels get new devices. They carry those devices for a few years as we go. They have insurance, they have coverage, and it takes quite a bit of time to get those devices ready. And then we have to recycle the old devices. So that's quite a bit of a process, mostly through the summer months. This year coming up, we have a migration of our Genesis platform. So Genesis is our student information system, and we are going to be saving a little bit of money, so that's always a good thing, by moving Genesis to a platform that's hosted in their environment, which also increases our security profile, because that's just less trouble for us here that we have to kind of protect, and allows Genesis to, and Genesis protects many districts. So By moving that platform over to Genesis, it just provides us with a cost savings and some extra security. So that's a big project for us this summer. We will also, speaking of security, we will be researching and implementing new content filtering systems and cybersecurity platforms. So as you guys can imagine, cybersecurity is something that we deal with pretty much on a regular basis. I say it all the time. It's the only thing that keeps me up at night. As we see, pretty large companies getting compromised. Schools are no different. We have to protect ourselves. So we are looking at new content and cybersecurity platforms for this coming year. And on that same conversation, we're always looking to improve district security and cybersecurity practices. It's a little bit different part of the conversation. That first goal is more about platforms and things, basically products that we can use to help protect. And then there are some other things, processes behind the scenes for our technology that we have to implement. If you're all familiar with 2FA or MFA, you log onto your bank and you get something on your phone, to kind of, prove who you are. We're instituting more of that in the district as we go. Every system that we have will basically have some kind of 2FA or MFA, anything with sensitive information. And we'll improve our data backups because it's so important to have good data backups. If there were ever a compromise or a problem with security, making sure all of our data is backed up is obviously very important. So those are the technology goals for the coming year. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, for this part of the evening, is there any old business? New business? I have a motion to adjourn this part of the evening, and then we'll take a little bit of a recess.
Motion to adjourn the retreat.
Second.
Thank you.